So will I. All right, welcome everyone to our Mercury Retrograde webinar in early April. As you can see on your screen, Mercury is going to be retrograde from April 9th through May 3rd. Mercury goes retrograde at 5 degrees Taurus, all the way back to 24 degrees Aries. Before we get started on that though, first of all, a few of our housekeeping slides. Here at EAN, you can study evolutionary astrology with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free audio podcasts that we publish. As Leroy said, we do the podcast of Star Lady and Media Monk. You can subscribe to our Astro Library, and of course we have our evolutionary astrology course. Here's a slide on our Astro Library, which contains over a dozen years of materials that we put together. We have put it into 3 different sections, as you can see on your screen. You can subscribe for 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring that you can cancel at any time. And we currently have a half-price special on the Astro Library. That is any subscription, a single section, all of them put together. What you would do is you would apply the coupon code ASTRODAY at checkout, and then you would receive the half-price discount. And Leroy, I know there's a deadline to this, but I don't remember that.
There is a deadline, and we decided Venus Direct, which is April 15th. So you got a couple weeks to make a choice on the Astro Library. Oh, by the way, I might also add, while we're recording this for the general public, for those that might get the recording and want a personal session with Star Lady or Kim Marie, she's also generously offered through Venus Direct to do an additional relationship chart. As you know, we have relationship astrology with EA, which is the synthesis of 2 charts, how they affect one another. And of course, the composite chart is that midpoint average of 2 charts. If you have a family member, an intimate partner, or somebody in your life that you're getting triggered by, perhaps that's a good opportunity to do the relationship chart with your own chart. So just find that personal consultations page of the website, which is under the forecasts menu on the homepage, and add both products to the cart. You'll get the additional chart, which is a $50 value, processed by Kim Marie and read for you, and another completely free. So that's our second special. I just kind of wanted to get that out there as well.
Thank you, Leroy. We never get triggered, do we? We live it just like everybody else. And here's our evolutionary astrology course. There's 3 different segments, as you can see on your screen. Segments 1 and 2 are both available materials only. Digital only are both the materials and the digital access to everything. Anytime you got questions on this, of course, you can always contact Leroy, Media Monk at evolutionaryastrology.net, or call the phone number you see on your screen, 605-348-5111. Of course, as you can see here, with Mercury retrograde from Taurus back to Aries, Taurus is ruled by Venus, the inner side of Venus. Aries is ruled by Mars. So guess what? Relationships are going to continue to be explored and processed through this Mercury retrograde. First of all, I'm going to go through a few basics. Why planetary retrogrades? Geocentric phenomena of apparent motion from our perspective here on Earth. The planets appear to slow down and reverse through the sky before going direct again. Any planetary retrograde causes a withdrawal from our status quo in order to redefine that planetary archetype according to our own individual perspective or natural law. Now, the status quo is going to give strong clues to wherever we may be compensating or buying into consensus conditionings. This would be known by the sign house aspects of that planet in our chart, natally, where it's transiting, our evolutionary state of consciousness with our soul, and of course the environmental conditionings that any of us are born into. Now, there is a principle of psychological compensation, which is being out of sync with your own true nature. So most souls have psychological compensations in order to appear normal or buy in to that status quo. Again, these compensations can take place anywhere we feel any sense of dissatisfaction. And as we said in the previous screen, you look to this via astrology by the natal and transiting planetary archetype, etc. Planetary retrogrades are always going to offer an opportunity to break free and align with our own individual nature. Answers to any planetary retrograde are always going to be found from within ourselves. A planetary retrograde archetype is always non-static. It's always in a perpetual state of evolving. The transiting sign and house is going to define how this planetary retrograde is manifesting for us. The opposite sign and house is going to provide that clarity and expression. A transiting planetary retrograde planet is always related back to the natal archetype. In this case, wherever the Mercury retrograde transit is occurring, it's always going to be related back to your natal Mercury archetype. Direct, retrograde, house, sign, aspects, etc. Now, if you happen to be someone who was born with Mercury retrograde, you will experience a temporary harmony during this Mercury retrograde transit, during any Mercury retrograde transit. Now, Mercury actually goes around the sun every 88 days. However, from our Earth-centered, geocentric perspective, it appears as if we have 3 to 4 Mercury retrogrades a year, which then makes Mercury seem to follow around the zodiac once a year, just like the sun appears to. Mercury retrogrades happen between 20 and 24 days. And when Mercury turns stationary retrograde or stationary direct, it appears to stand still in the sky for 1 day. As you can see visually here from this Earth perspective, as Mercury goes around the sun, it never appears to be more than 29 degrees away from the sun. This is why your Mercury position in your birth chart will always be the sign before, the sign of, or the sign after, whatever your sun sign is. Here's a visual. If we would look at the nighttime sky, here's Mercury entering this point where it's going to go stationary direct. Here's where it goes retrograde, reverses through the zodiac, and here's the direct period. And then here's this post shadow to the point where Mercury first went retrograde. This is the 1, 2, 3 times passage that actually any planet will appear to make if we would watch it in that nighttime sky every night and pinpoint it relative to all the other planetary objects in the nighttime sky. Mercury retrograde patterns. Mercury reverses through the elements of the zodiac when it goes retrograde. Going backwards, water, air, earth, fire. Approximately 1 year, 3 to 4 retrogrades in one element, and then the next year transitioning between one element to the next one. So in 2017, Mercury retrograde cycles start in Earth, going back to fire, and they end in the fire element. This transitioning 1 year to the next does not follow the calendar year at this time. In 2017, Mercury is going to be in Earth signs 4 months and in fire signs 4.5 months. Next year, the retrograde cycles will actually start in that fire element and end in fire back to water. Again, Mercury is going to be in fire signs 4.5 months, Earth signs 4 months. Fire signs are going to stir up the communications, the arguments, the impatience to listen, refusal to listen. Fire signs, creativity, beliefs with Sag. There can be defensiveness. We might not want to review that larger picture. We might want to have issues with creativity. When it goes back to earth signs, we're going to be consumed with the element of the physical. Resources, equipment breakdowns, communications will take longer. Can we slow down and actually listen? Can we speak slowly enough to be heard, clearly enough? We're going to review how we want to go through that space-time element, earth element, physical to all of life's issues. You can just see how I just spoke right here. Earth excites it up, or excuse me, fire excites it up, earth slows it down. Taurus back to Aries. Can you see how this is going to take place for all of us with the retrograde starting in an earth sign, going back to a fire sign? Here's the Mercury archetypes. I'm going to skip over some of these slides. If you're new, you're going to have the PDF that you can refer to each and every one of these slides. Those of you who so methodically show up for our free Mercury retrograde classes, thank you very, very much. Mercury rules 2 signs at this point. The outer side of Mercury is Gemini in the 3rd house. The outer comes from the active polarity. Mutable modality, air element. And of course, you can see on your screen the different ways that we will look at Mercury's rulership of Gemini 3rd house and that phenomena of classifying the world with facts, words, numbers, etc. Mercury, of course, via Gemini in the 3rd house, all kinds of communications. The inner side of Mercury is its rulership of Virgo in the 6th house. This is coming inner from the passive polarity, energy returning back to the center. Mutable modality again, earth element. This is where we get into the ability to analyze with Virgo in the 6th house. This is where we can get into all the distortions of human-made religions, sadomasochism, guilt linked to atonement, the victim, anger, the victor. And this is where we ultimately are going to learn service to another or society, as Virgo in the 6th house gives way to Libra and the 7th and the 2nd half of the zodiac. When we go through a Mercury retrograde in general, we're releasing excess thought. Our mind is saturated. It gets hard to process info and ideas in our world. It's time to review and release any worn out mental patterns. Mercury retrograde, we turn inward to quiet the mind. We unplug from everything. Can you put away your smartphone and social media? We learn to think for ourselves. We learn to trust our intuition first, logic and fact second. This is because left brain, Mercury ruled, is giving way to right brain. Mercury, as ruler of Gemini, points to its polarity Sag, ruler Jupiter. Mercury, ruler of Virgo, points to its polarity Pisces, ruler Neptune. Make sense? Left brain giving way to right brain. In other words, we periodically have to have some organization of all this information coming at us into a way that makes sense and allows us to find some level of inner mental peace. Mercury retrogrades always activate this mutable quadrant. Again, Mercury retrograde, finding quiet time in all the busyness of the retrograde overload that is so common with Mercury retrograde. It is always a time period to have multiple communications until we can allow things to funnel down into that larger picture which gives us clarity. Mercury retrograde, the details, paying attention to the details. Dot your T's, cross your I's, look at this thing one more time, review our itinerary for our plane tickets again, pack extra things so that we can go with the flow if our flights get delayed, canceled, etc. Whatever way you're having to pay attention to this fast-moving, paced world of ours. It is. Pay attention to the details. Look at it once, look at it twice, look at it 3 times. Mercury retrograde is about doing it more than once sometimes. It's spring here. We actually had a ½ inch of rain in our little western mountain range where we live, western South Dakota in the Black Hills. It's one of my favorite times when we have moist, wet, rainy weather. This weekend, my nephew, bless his soul, he's willing to come and do some of the grunt work for Leroy and I in our gardening, and we're laying down some soaker hoses. And my 2 guys were very patient with me because I was saying Mercury retrograde pre-shadow. All right, guys, I know this is taking me a little time, but I'm going to do it slow. I'm going to do it methodical. I'm going to do it the best way I can, so I only do it once. Again, we're not going to do this again. This soaker hose is going to rot in place around my shrubs over the next 20 years. And bless both of them. When I kind of said it and explained it that way, they both slowed down, joked with each other, said, okay, we're just going to go through this process step by step. Mercury, pre-shadow, Taurus, methodical, Earth. Here are the days in which we're looking at Mercury in Aries, Mercury in Taurus. You can see these dates. Mercury Aries, March 13th to 31st. Mercury Taurus, March 31st to April 20th. And as it retrogrades, again, April 9th here at 5 Taurus. Then it's going to go back into Taurus, April 20th to May 15th. It's going to go direct here, what is it, May 3rd, 24 Aries, and then go into Taurus again, May 15th through June 6th. Mercury retrograde in one sign has a tendency to stay there for about 2 months. When you extend Mercury into 2 signs, it typically covers about 3 months. And it just so happens that this Mercury retrograde is evenly divided a month and a half between each of these 2 signs. Here's your dates. The Mercury conjunction to the Sun last time, as you can see on your screen, March 6th, 16.5 Pisces, went into shadow March 27th, 24 Aries. Here's the retrograde, April 9th, 5 Taurus. Here's the highlight of the Mercury retrograde. The interior conjunction to the Sun, April 19th, is 0 Taurus. Mercury direct, May 3rd, 24 Aries. Here's where it leaves shadow, May 20th, 5 Taurus. And of course, here's the next Mercury exterior conjunction to the Sun. Summer solstice is 0 degrees Cancer. We'll look at these dates again. We'll look at the circle charts of these specific points as we move through it. Starting with the Mercury stationary retrograde. I like to draw it up 0 degrees Aries so we all are looking at the same energy. Yes, you can draw the Mercury stationary retrograde chart specific to wherever your location is. The big thing about this Mercury retrograde is, of course, the background of the cardinal T-square going on all through 2017, 1-year numerology, the base note, the Uranus waxing squares to Pluto, Aries Capricorn still active. And this year, Jupiter in Libra's oppositions to Uranus, last quarter squares to Pluto. As you can see, this Mercury retrograde also will have throughout this spring a grand trine in its background as well. And those two planets and the nodal axis are going to show us the aspects Mercury's going to make. We have a more active than usual Mercury retrograde. Stay tuned. The grand trine, of course, Saturn's waning trines from Sag to Uranus in Aries. Truth versus lies, big theme. And as you can see, as the nodal axis is finishing up in Virgo Pisces, it's within orb, creating a grand trine. How are each of us emotionally being affected by Saturn waning trine Uranus and all kinds of social structures and beliefs turning topsy-turvy in our world with Uranus in Aries. This Aries point is going to continue to be active as we look at this through the chart. So bottom line, this Mercury retrograde, we have the ease of the grand trine, the ability to turn a blind eye and pretend this isn't happening in our world, or I don't want to look at it, and all of the discomfort and upsets of a cardinal grand cross underneath it. And as you can see here again, the focal point throughout all of this Mercury retrograde is going to be Uranus. And throughout this, the sun right here in this picture. The next Mercury retrograde is going to be on this point of the grand trine. It'll be active as well in the latter degrees of Leo Aquarius. Stay tuned for this summer. But as you can see right here, there's a lot of initiation that's being activated. Whether you are from more progressive or inclusive perspectives, or conservative or exclusive perspectives, can you see how both are being activated throughout this Mercury retrograde? Mercury retrograde Taurus, again, April 9th, 5 degrees Taurus. We are going to be reviewing our values and what is most important to us in our life on a very personal level. Venus's rulership of Taurus is values. It is survival issues, food, clothing, shelter, resources. So what we're going to do is be taking the time to communicate what is changing for us according to our evolving value system. I used to think it was important to have XYZ resource. And you know what? Don't need it. Doesn't mean anything to me anymore. There is evolving resources, and for many of us with this Mercury retrograde, it can be going from outer values to inner values. Pluto in Capricorn is a big theme on either how many resources can you accumulate. You look at some of the leaders that we have in the United States with this new administration. How many millions and billions of dollars do you need? For most of us, the average citizen in the US, there can be this subtle yet important recognition of my health and wellness is more important than how big my house is, or even how much money I have in my bank account. What good is all that money if I'm 6 feet under? So we're having this review of what is most important to us. And of course, with Mercury, how are we communicating it? We are expressing what we want to say. Can we take the time to listen? And when Mercury's in Taurus, it's not necessarily fast communications. We can still be abrupt when we feel like our security is being stirred up in some way. And yet, after the upset, we can actually need that physical time to process through, to ponder through, in order to come up with whatever words or concepts make most sense to us to then share. Of course, as we said before, with Taurus ruling food, clothing, and shelter, and then after the basic needs to survive, moving into the refined needs, art, fur coats, how many zeros behind the dollar sign in our bank account. There's going to be reviewing the values around money and resources on all levels. It doesn't matter where you are, what's happening in the news right now. The fact that in Africa, I'm not going to remember the countries right now. Just think of the ones that you might hear in the news every once in a while. The rebellion that is going on in certain rulerships in Africa. But the issue is that all of a sudden, again, we are having people starving. And they are literally saying that in the next 30 days, there could be as many as 20 million people who starve to death in 3 countries of Africa because they don't have access to food and water. And what are we planning to do in the US? The new administration wants to, I don't remember the figure of how much they want to decrease the amount of money we give for foreign aid. Now, mind you, this is coming from a billionaire president with children who have hundreds of millions of dollars. Where is this cardinal grand cross of haves and have-nots being exposed? Excuse me? They should take their own personal bank accounts and give money from there if they want to balance the budget and they think we have to decrease it. I'll try to stay off my political soapbox. For some people, they may be overspending or living beyond their resources. For many of us, we may be learning how to live with less. But my example that I just gave are those that don't even have a choice. We're exposing extremes of haves and have-nots with Pluto in Capricorn. And this Mercury retrograde, especially when it's moving through Taurus, is going to bring this issue to the surface and have more and more people going, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. We'll also find that as Mercury is moving through Taurus, direct, stationary, retrograde, retrograde, and then direct again, any area where we are digging our heels in the sand, where we like that security of Taurus and we don't want to move, we're going to find the polarity Scorpio cataclysms. However, they may be necessary for each of us personally in our life and wherever it may be necessary on any collective level from whatever national perspective you may be experiencing this retrograde from. Now, as we said before, Mercury retrograde in signs ruled by Venus and Mars will of course bring up all of the relationship issues. What are our relating values in our world? This will bring up those intimate relationships, Taurus, Aries, polarities, Scorpio, Libra. And what we're going to be looking at as Mercury retrograde points to those polarity signs is the opportunity here is to shift from a perspective of me and my stuff to you and our stuff, to go from a self perspective to our perspective. And to be able to do this with balancing both sides of the equation. Mercury retrograde, what's important to me, what do I value? So it's not about losing a sense of ourself or what's important to us. It's about stirring it all up and give and take, pro and con, communicating, and finding a new equilibrium to balance me, you, and us. Here, Mercury retrograding through Taurus is going to be taking the time to slow down and honor our inner relationship. Venus ruling the Taurus and the Venus rulership bringing the inner side of Venus, a relationship with ourselves first. And then that will help us then move into what needs to change and evolve in our relationships. So just take a moment. How is this working for you? It can be your intimate relationships with the Cardinal Grand Cross of Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto. It can go beyond just intimacy. Where do you have relationships stirred up in your world? Is it work? Is it friends? Etc. How are you redefining your own sense of self-reliance, self-acceptance, self-worth, self-love, all these Taurus words, regardless of your outer evolving world of relationships? Wait a minute, I got to take care of me. And when I'm the best I can be, then I know how to move forward in my relationships as healthy as possible. Maybe you're someone who gives too much of your resources away in relationships. And you're recognizing, wait a minute, that child, that parent, that person just takes it and keeps repeating that old pattern. That's maybe not the best way for me to share my resources. This Mercury retrograde in Taurus will, of course, as we've been saying here, have us review our collective value systems around a variety of issues. What's happening since and thank you, international people, for allowing me to use US as an example. As I always state, it's my perspective. What's been happening since a Republican president and Republican-controlled House and Senate in the US not unable to pass health care? They call it repeal and replace, but as you can see, there's been a lot of focus on repeal and not much on replace or reform. And the healthcare, initiations failed. What's happening? People are realizing, wait a minute, I have gotten some benefits from my Affordable Care Act or Obamacare over the last 7 years. There's an evolving collective review of our values around universal health care versus our free market-based system, which profits insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. U.S. is the only first world country without universal health care. And what's emerging in the news here? Even from conservative and Republican perspectives. Oh, wait a minute. More and more people are recognizing universal health care may be a basic right. So this Mercury retrograde is going to stir this all up. And as it moves back into Aries with this Cardinal Grand Cross, could we see some initiations in this direction? I do not think the current conservative agenda will be able to downsize people who have gotten health care over the last few years. They will not get away with making it more expensive than it is now. Stay tuned. This will be unfolded. Of course, where else is it taking place here? Increasing the U.S. military spending versus our social programs. Our small little newspaper is having a 3-day expose talking about how many social programs will see decreases in their budget. And while we have a military base in our small community, there's just program after program after program that is going to be hit especially hard in our small little community. And it can be stirring up all kinds of ponderings around the current administration. Try not to belabor this. Climate change versus climate denial. I'll tell you about the latest march coming up on Earth Day if you haven't heard about it. Another slide or two. When Mercury retrogrades back into Aries, then all of a sudden this energy is going to shift and it's going to increase a sense of self and what we need and what we want before consideration of others. And we're going to get extremely frustrated wherever we feel that our freedom and ability to do whatever we want is contained or thwarted. Communications are going to get more abrupt, more intense, more angry. People are going to want to be jumping in. They're going to want to act before they think. Mercury retrograde in Aries is about thinking before you act. And yet when it moves back here after Taurus, it's just going to be a bunch of pent-up energy that just wants to go out in all directions. Defensive driving, everyone. Patience is going to decrease. Conversations are going to go back and forth between multiple subjects. We're going to have to repeat back after one another. Oh, wait a minute. What did you say? I didn't understand you. Is this what you said? Can we take a breath? Slow down. Listen. Leroy and I have already had our little Mercury pre-shadow road rage. We were delivering our young nephew to school one morning after an early family event. And what was Kim Marie doing? Of course, I was on my phone reading the news as my beautiful husband was driving. Our special needs nephew was in the back seat, and we almost got sideswiped. And all of a sudden, Leroy's swerving all over the road. We're swinging wildly. And our nephew laughs the rest of the way to school because he thought Uncle Leroy was being funny. No,
Hey, I
woke us all up.
I have a Mercury retrograde retraction for that statement. I actually swerved exactly parallel to this Corvette that was coming at me from the other lane and avoided a collision. That's not all over the road.
No, you weren't. You're right.
Regardless of what Brecken thought in the back seat laughing at me.
No, Leroy used to teach defensive driving for private companies and government entities, and I so appreciate your ability to drive defensively, honey. Thank you. That's why we're more comfortable when Leroy drives and Kim Marie's in the passenger seat. Not that I haven't done pretty good driving, but yes, you're right. Thank you for correcting me, Mercury retrograde in Aries. So this is a time to review the value of independence and freedom. Where do we feel imprisoned? What needs to change in our world? How are we ultimately self-responsible for any and all situations? Where are we attempting to control others? There's going to be a give and take with that, with the Libra polarity. And of course, when we start looking collectively at people and groups in general, there's going to be defensiveness and anger. I don't want to listen. I want you to do as I say. And where are we trying to force someone to see it from our perspective? Where's the compromise? Maybe easier said than done. However, where can we make the effort? Those who are overinflating themselves may be deflated, and those who do not speak up may find themselves pressured to the point where they have to find their voice. That's just all there is to it. We may also find a lot of collective lines in the sand drawn. It's going to intensify personally, collectively. How many of us have some, let's just say, concerns that our impulsive president may, become trigger happy? We've already seen the conversations around nuclear war and, of course, the increase to the military taking place all over the place. Can we review this? Where are we seeing this up in the news again and again and again? Of course, social activism may become more hostile, tempers boil over. We may also find that individuals are feeling led to participate socially, actively for the first time, or they may be led to activate in new ways. They may be mentally processing, how do I act? How do I become involved? How do I initiate? And of course, probably the biggest thing that we have coming up here is the March for Science on Earth Day. I don't know how many of you remember April 22nd, 1970. That was the first time we had Earth Day. That was coming off of the mid-60s with the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in mid-Virgo. And remember Earth Day? That was the hippies and, those of us who were more into the alternative ways, the health food movement, the peace not war movement, etc., etc. Well, this morning I went and did a Google search, March for Science Rapid City, and it is now being organized by our local technology and mineral college. And I thought, how interesting that we've had such a shift from the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions to Uranus square Pluto, where our local college that would be more aligned with mining and technology is now leading the March for Science, and climate change is real. It was like, oh, that's a shift, Cardinal Grand Crossed. The Libra polarity, then, from Mercury Retrograde Aries. I love this quote. You guys know I say this a lot. Your freedom ends at my nose, and my freedom ends at your nose. Can we calm down enough to listen inwardly and outwardly? This is opportunity to reach new levels of understanding with ourselves and others, to have multiple conversations until we can reach a new homeostasis. And of course, with the Libra polarity, here's Venus again, ruling the outer side of Libra. How are our relationships evolving? How are we learning new ways to communicate? Relationships are as necessary as breathing air. We learn through Aries-Libra, action-reaction. The relationship is the reaction to our actions. We don't operate in isolation or vacuums. The universe is going to respond to us, whether it is the person in our world on an intimate basis, whether it is the social group down the street from us, or whether it is Mother Nature responding to all of the effects and actions we've put out there into the climate. So this is a time to review how we can communicate with others in a way so that they can actually hear what we are saying. I love this quote. Assumption and lack of communication are the #1 relationship killers. We all perceive, Libra, differently. We've all lived different lives. We have different views. Understanding that before getting angry at someone for not believing what you believe. Understand that before getting angry. So let's look at these different evolutionary states of consciousness that EA works with. Consensus state of consciousness, which is approximately 7 out of 10 souls on planet Earth. Any country, any race, they cannot think outside of the time-space circumstances they are in the midst of. That means our language must relate to them and their personal environment. Can you have a conversation with someone who voted for Trump because he was going to save their job in the coal industry? Western South Dakota, next door, our neighbor, Gillette, Wyoming, everybody is just ecstatic because they're going to get their coal jobs back. And yet the reality is that renewable energy is creating new jobs 5 to 1 compared to the coal industry. So how can we find that language to share with them on a personally relevant level? They're not going to understand the big picture of saving Gaia. Adjusting your language to be heard. Individuated state of consciousness, approximately 2 out of 10 souls on planet Earth. They're rebelling against the consensus norms. They're searching for their own ideas, their own thinking and beliefs. This is where language can engage. We can stretch how we're talking with someone. They're going to challenge us back. How can we go back and forth and perhaps evolve and learn? This is where we can actually be a little open-minded with things. And of course, when you're spirituated state of consciousness, you understand universal, timeless natural laws and principles. Your language must embrace everyone. What we must be careful of here is becoming elitist. We can understand that larger picture. We can understand the melting of all the glaciers and the effect it's going to have over the next 100 years. But we must be able to come into planet Earth, be on planet Earth, talk through planet Earth. I told the Roy, honey, we got to dig out our t-shirts. We're going to this march on April 22nd. Well, he can have a choice, but I'm asking him to come with me. And I want to see who I can speak to, who's going to be there from different individuated perspectives. And can we have some conversations that can be science and spirituality, or as I look at the astronomy and the astrology, the two sides of the coin. Where can we engage? There's so much that can be sparked with this Mercury retrograde because of how it's activating the Cardinal Grand Cross and this trine with Uranus to Aries. There can be mental breakthroughs. Now here's the Scorpio polarity. We can have mental breakthroughs with an intention to empower ourselves, Mercury retrograde Taurus, and others, Scorpio polarity. Where can we find commonly shared values evolving? For instance, is universal health care a right in the United States? Do we need to increase our military 10%? Where's the dollar for dollar with the Department of Peace? How can we link all the social issues together? Self-reliant souls, Mercury retrograde in Taurus, have less fear of the unknown. With the Scorpio polarity, that archetype of Scorpio is where we struggle between separating versus returning forces in the universe. And the more self-reliant we are, the less we fear the cataclysms that can come in the universe. We can look to that Scorpio archetype called recycling. Whatever we have to let go can be reborn, rebirthed in ever better ways. We will have confrontations here to expose any limitations within our own thought processes, any limitations we have in our relationships that must evolve. These relationship evolutions, personal and collective, will reflect our own individual evolutions. Communications can be the vehicle to release the pent-up emotions. That Scorpio polarity point. Scorpio is fixed water. That slow down of the physical world with Taurus and the slow down of communications. If they're not getting anywhere, that emotional energy will build up until something has to bubble over and we get to the essence of what needs to be communicated. Of course, this can definitely lead to all of the classic power struggles. The distortions of this will be those who want to find ways to manipulate, control, and have power over. It's going to be, again, that base note of Pluto in Capricorn, the plutocrats, versus Uranus in Aries, the rebels, going back and forth and back and forth. And the powers that be are not going to let go easily. It's going to take the masses to rise up. There was a phrase with this little picture that I have here. The power of the many can overcome the ruthless few, if I can paraphrase that. Another thing that is always dear to my heart, for those of you who have not heard me say this, publicbankinginstitute.org. And here's the link. Find a chapter. There is a national chapter for Canada. And then if you're from the United States, you can scroll down from this link and find the states that are active in your world. And cities have been included in the various states. Again, more and more people on a collective level. Mercury retrograde in Aries, what about me? Mercury retrograde in Taurus, what about my resources? Are going to be recognizing with the Libra and Scorpio polarities, it's not really fair. What are we doing about it? How are we choosing to be active? How are we educating ourselves, Mercury retrograde? How are we communicating it? Please support this organization if you believe that the interest on money and resources should be returned back to the collective for the benefit of the collective versus the millionaire, billionaire few. You will see this become more and more exposed as you look at the current administration that we have in our world. Okay, so let's look at Mercury's various aspects that it's going to make. But again, here's a review. Here are the dates of the Mercury shadow from 24 Aries to 5 Taurus, the highlight. Earth Day, March for Science, anybody, at 0 degrees Taurus. A couple of days later, Mercury is retrograde back into Aries. The Earth Day March is going to take place with Mercury at about 29, 28 degrees Aries, activating that Uranus point. There can be all kinds of inspiration that's going to come. I am looking forward to watching this march and all its satellite marches make the Women's March the day after inauguration look like peanuts. Please be a part of it with me. And then, of course, here's the direct, and here's the third passage of Mercury post-shadow. Mercury's interior conjunction on April 19th is going to be, as I said, right down here, 0 degrees Taurus. Then going back into Aries, you can see how it's still activating within orb, this grand trine, bringing up more and more information on the whole resource picture, and of course activating the cardinal T-square. Here's one of my favorite March for Science t-shirts. This one you can purchase from redbubble.com if you're interested in getting your own t-shirts. This t-shirt right here will support all of the LGBTQ programs and organizations. Again, we can see so many diverse social issues coming together, and that Aries point is going to be all the initiations in the new ways that will have such an effect on us in broad collective levels. Now, Mercury moves so fast, it's always active or aspecting several planets during its retrograde cycle. EA uses the 360-degree cycle of phases and aspects to show us how active we really are. Here's an example of that. I'm not going to go over it, but we have 4 different kinds of squares: crescent first quarter, disseminating last quarter. So we look at aspects from 0 to 360. This was originally initiated by Dane Rudier in his book, The Lunation Cycle. It was expanded upon by Jeffrey Green, the receiver in Dreams of Evolutionary Astrology. And many of us in the second and third generations have just taken this further and further. It's been something that I found this in my early days of astrological study. So I've worked with this 360 cycle of aspects for 30 years, and I just don't know any other way to do it. And it just brings such a wealth of meaning. It takes the confusion out of aspects. And so if you're new, this is one of the areas that I've specialized in teaching astrology. And it really helps with interpreting charts when you can look at aspects from this perspective. Here are the aspects Mercury retrograde is going to make. Every one of them is 3 times except for the Venus, the Mercury-Venus conjunction. 2 aspects to Mars, Uranus conjunction, 2 the waxing aspects to Neptune, Saturn's trine, another aspect to Venus, trines to the nodes. It's a lot of Mercury retrograde hits, everybody. Again, this is why this Mercury retrograde is so stirred up. Might be important to breathe. Make sure you get some exercise. Pay attention to those details. Just wrap yourself in that white purple blue light, as Leroy would always say, or the golden white light, as my mother would say. I put this slide in again. Relationships. Mercury's multiple aspects to Venus and Mars are, of course, going to create opportunities to improve communications around relationship values, Venus, and goals, Mars. Needed to include Chiron here. The aspects to Chiron and Neptune are going to review how and where we unconsciously project de facto goddess expectations into our relationships. We are spiritual beings having human relationships, and of course, we evolve through our relationships, and this Mercury retrograde is doing it through the communications. Now, Mercury had a conjunction to Venus, March 18th, in about 9 Aries. Mercury's now pulled ahead of Venus. Mercury's going to make a gazillion waxing sextiles to Venus this retrograde cycle, the next retrograde cycle. It won't have another conjunction to Venus until the December Mercury retrograde cycle, I think in Sag. And so Mercury's ahead of Venus throughout the rest of this year. There are always Mercury-Venus aspects. Conscious mind, Mercury, and its values. When Mercury's ahead of Venus, we are forcing the mind to support the needs and wants that are important to Venus. We're always out there trying to do whatever Venus wants. Figure it out, mentally process, ponder, communicate, review it, go forward, review it, go forward. Mercury's ahead. Mercury can be action as much as Mars. Just think of all the ways that you mentally ponder in any given minute, let alone in a day or a month. Here, we're looking for the courage, Mercury ahead of Venus, to initiate and act upon our new relating values. Mercury retrograde in Aries and Taurus. We must also, though, have that ability to be flexible and change as the information comes to us through this Mercury retrograde. Do I want this or do I want that? What am I going to do? How am I going to go forward? How am I going to go about it? Of course, this Mercury retrograde can feel like one more extension in reviewing this current Venus retrograde cycle that we're in the midst of. Venus is retrograde right now, back into Pisces. As we record this call, it goes stationary direct April 15th at 27 Pisces. Venus rose as a morning star on March 29th at 2 degrees Aries. Venus is retrograde once every year and a half. You can refer to my Venus retrograde class if you want. It is on our home. It's on our website. You go under forecasting webinars and you look for Venus retrograde and you can find more detailed information on that. But many astrologers are starting to recognize when Venus makes that interior conjunction to the sun, it's initiating a new 19-month cycle. And when it rises at as that morning star, many times the interior conjunction, the heliacal rising, same sign of the zodiac, and that rules the next 19 months for Venus. In Aries, it's the warrior goddess. And it will rule until that next Venus retrograde cycle, late 2018, Scorpio-Libra. And so it's just emphasizing again that Aryan energy, as we've pointed out in our circle slides. So what we're looking for here is the ability to think before taking actions. My mantra, I initiate with consideration of others. Venus retrograde in Aries, although it will be tempered as it goes back into Pisces where it is, but it can still tempers flare, anger, Can we remain true to ourself as we shed old values and improve or look to the new ones? So while Venus is retrograde, Aries, Pisces, Mercury's retrograde, Taurus-Aries, the commonality is Aries. Initiation, frustration, all the Aries word distortions, all the Aries movement forward, even with multiple efforts necessary. Mercury is waning to Mars, and Mercury is going to have two different aspects, the waning semi-square and the waning semi-sextile. It's going to make each of those two aspects 3 times for a total of 6 aspects to Mars throughout the whole Mercury retrograde cycle. Will be followed by Mercury catching up to Mars and having a conjunction to it June 28th at 16 degrees Cancer. When Mercury is behind Mars, it increases our ability to think before we act. So Mercury's ahead of Venus, moving ourselves forward into the future. Mercury's behind Mars. Oh, wait a minute. What's going to happen here if I do this or that? So this Mercury retrograde, multiple chances to review our goals, desires, and actions. In general, this is still going to make for activity. Mercury, Mars, do not sit still. But it will lead us toward being able to ponder or think about how we want to put energy into actions. Mars is the most active planet with Mercury during this retrograde cycle. Again, 2 aspects, 6 different times. It increases the desire to act, yet again balanced with Mercury behind Mars. So this might give us a check to bulldozing our way through anything, individually and collectively. Whew, count on this energy, because we, in my estimation, have a trigger happy new president in the US who's bound and determined to prove himself worthy of the job. So if it doesn't work here, he's going to try something else and try something else and try something else. And we're going to be all over the place. And it may be the hell with consequences. I've got to be on top. This gets to be very interesting energy then, looking at these Mercury-Mars aspects. The whole point, what are the effects of my actions upon myself and others? How can we make the most effective use of our time and energy? Can we have the conversation again and again and again and again? And the communications may be the most important action we can take. Negotiation over war. Negotiation and compromise over lines in the sand. Stay tuned. This is going to be written as we move through this on a collective level. Take a moment and just kind of think where this is happening for you. What can you do in your personal world with how you may be feeling frustrated or impatient? Of course, Mercury is going to make 3 waxing sextiles to Saturn, as Saturn makes 3 waning, Mercury's going to make 3 waxing trines. Okay, my left brain, Mercury engage. Mercury's going to make 3 waxing trines to Saturn, as Saturn makes 3 waning trines to Uranus. Mercury waxing trine Saturn instinctively searching for and recognizing the broader truth of any subject. If we ask for the truth, if we make the effort, it can come through for us. So it's reviewing what is truth for ourselves versus all of the conditionings in our world from the consensus. Mercury retrograde, throwing off the old patterns, throwing off old truths that no longer serve us. What is truth for me? Now, the distortions of this can be clinging, trying, ease of energy, clinging to whatever version of truth represents security. I'm right, you're wrong. My truth is better than your truth. My way is better than your way. Gosh darn it, I voted for Trump and I'm just going to stick with it. Doesn't matter if everything I wanted him to do is blowing up in my face. I'm just going to stick with it because this is what I said I believed in. I'm going to believe in him. This can also, of course, be the distortions of collective lies versus truth, struggling for supremacy. The what do you call it? Alternative facts and fake news. This is the Mercury Saturn trines. This is the Saturn-Uranus waning trines. Alternative facts universe, so to speak. This can be con artists attempting either new or expanded versions of proselytizing on various issues. Take your pick. Leroy, I hear you breathing.
Well, with the trines to Saturn and Venus, I thought it would be a kind of a good segue to acknowledge your public banking foray with some input from one of our students out in California. Basically, Judy said that, there's a big, obviously recreational marijuana use is big in California. There's an interest in public banking around that because all the federally insured banks cannot accept pot money.
Mm-hmm.
So she says that there's a big thing going on in her county, in Sonoma and around there, with an interest in public banking just because of that influx of cash that people are having to put somewhere. They want public banking just to have somewhere to put their cash. This could be the real impetus for a lot of this resource success that recreational marijuana, medical marijuana represents.
Not only that, if the conservatives are in any way successful in reducing the laundry list of social programs they want to cut back on, that as well can serve as an impetus for the whole public banking movement. I think it's only a matter of time before enough, just like the consensus in the United States is evolving towards universal health care as a right versus for-profit to pharmaceutical and insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is going to happen with the public banking movement and returning the interest back into the public coffers to actually support some infrastructure.
Well, Judy is not mic'd, but she's responding on the Q&A board and says it was actually voted in. A public banking initiative on some level was obviously voted in. And of course, we know Jerry Brown is so anti-Trump on a lot of social issues like marijuana, like sanctuary cities, all of the social issues, that a lot of us are concerned with are Jerry Brown's issues. So I'm sure there's going to be another wave of progressive thinking coming out of the state of California.
Yeah, and there's also a Democrat running for a gubernatorial office in either Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, one of those Northeast states, there's actually the Democratic candidate running on the public banking platform, having public banking on his platform as he's running. I think between now, well, just next year, I'll do an extended workshop on Uranus going into Taurus, and I'll do like I did years ago when Uranus went into Aries. I'll do Uranus in Taurus through all the 12 houses. And then we're going to find in the beginning of the next decade, Uranus will make the waxing trines to Pluto, Uranus and Taurus to Pluto and Capricorn.
Sure.
If we use this Aries initiation throughout the rest of this decade, if we use this new administration as progressive motivation, I mean, there is so much we can do to get the ball rolling. And again, this is a 1 year with numerology as well. And I've always felt that banking is money, resources. Money's the issue that networks every issue issue together.
Oh, gee, really? Yeah. You know, I should I should clarify on Judy's behalf, because really she was just clarifying that recreational pot was approved in California, as we all know.
Yeah.
The public banking issue is always a local issue, but really the pot thing out there is pushing it. I don't think there's been any state law, you know, passed about public banking, but this is all a local deal. So Judy also says there's something coming up out there called the Emerald Cup. The Emerald Cup, which is it's going to be a large conglomeration of pot growers in Santa Rosa that's going to talk about more of these banking issues, etc.
Oh yeah, it's kind of the major cities across the U.S. that's leading the public banking movement, and of course, you know, the cities are just as much cash strapped as the states are, and so many of them have had their infrastructure tied up in high interest loans that, you know, were not spoken about as loudly over our, you know, Great Recession in this last decade. And so all we need is a couple of major cities to do it, and it's Santa Fe, New Mexico, Philadelphia, which of course is where we declared independence. They have it on a personal level. And by the way, it was who was it? Benjamin Franklin, I think, who was so successful in Pennsylvania in doing the first public banking. And then of course in California, Sacramento, Oakland, San Francisco. As soon as we get a few of these big cities doing it, just like you saw recreational marijuana and now medical marijuana and now recreational marijuana, just as you've seen, you know, a few start and then boom, it starts to expand until it's the consensus. Same thing with the LGBT issues, you know, the $15 wage issues, you know, all kinds of, I mean, I don't think we're going to see progressive issues go by the wayside, but we will see conservative or exclusionary interests grab as much as they can because they see the writing on the wall.
It's backlash. But I just need to acknowledge you on behalf of Judy, because she says you've been talking about this for years, and as I know, you know, sitting down here in the studio while you're doing these webinars, and we're finally getting, you know, this movement, this grassroots movement, various colors of green for sure. And you're way ahead of the game, according to Judy. So a little acknowledgement.
Thank you, Miss Judy. I appreciate that. I have a friend who's in spirit world who turned me on to Ellen Brown Web of Debt. She was the founder of the Public Banking Institute. I have a good friend in spirit world who turned me on to her back in 2006, 2007. And then as Pluto started going into Capricorn, it was like, whoa, here it is. So Ellen Brown, who is from California, is my idol. She deserves the credit. So as you can see, looking at the screen, I'm just going to, move on. You've probably had a chance to read these slides. There's a lot of creativity that we can come through with and organize around on these progressive social issues. Mercury again is going to be waxing semi-sextile to Chiron, semi-square to Neptune. With Chiron again, it's Mercury retrograde, reflections on spirituality and religion must be followed through with acting upon waxing semi-sextile, whatever our emerging beliefs are. Just tie this into what we just spoke about a few minutes ago. There's a potential here for, major self-healings as well as distorting into self-victimization. The other distortions can be if we have an inability or unwillingness to listen, head in the sand, Pisces, avoid or neglecting communications. You really want to be making the effort. How do I heal? How do I heal? How do I heal myself? How do I help heal others? How are my beliefs evolving and expanding? Mercury's conjunctions to Uranus, we've been touching upon that. There is so much that can spark here. Oh gosh, you might want to run around with a pen and paper or the recorder on your smartphone to be able to keep track of all the inspiration that can be coming through for you. Excuse my cough. Of course, what are we going to want to do? We're going to want to immediately follow it through with action. And with Uranus, you pay attention to the repetition going forward into the future. And if it comes again, 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 then this can be some of the ways in which you may want to move forward. We may find that our ability to listen may be compromised. Mercury is conscious mind. Uranus is the individuated unconscious mind. Mercury left brain. Uranus is sometimes whole brain, although that's really Neptune. So you can see where it's conscious, unconscious, basically. And this is where we can short circuit. So you've got to find ways to keep your nervous system calm with these conjunctions. And if it really is long-term inspiration, it will be here through the Mercury retrograde, through these conjunctions. Of course, we can see technology and social issues in the news. Two examples of which I was just reading about today. A lot of the tech companies banded together. I want to say Facebook and Mozilla were two of them. They've created a new nonprofit. They are working with the City University in New York City, and they're creating a new nonprofit dedicated to journalism, supporting truth and facts in the news. There's a response. Here's another technological issue for you. How many of you have pets, cats and dogs, and you get a microchip in them so that if you lose your pet and it ends up in a veterinary place or a humane society place, they check to see who the owner is and you get a phone call. That has happened to me many times with my cats. We can do this with humans too. In Sweden, there is a company with about 3,000 employees, and they are putting that same type of chip into the palm of the hand, and they are now swiping their hand to be able to buy a latte or open a locked door. I had to think on this one for a little while, and I went, wait a minute, Sweden is pretty gal darn socially progressive. And it's not anything the company's forcing, it's voluntary, and the people are loving the convenience of not having to carry pieces of paper or go through XYZ. They like just being able to swipe their hand and off they go with whatever they're doing, working for this company and having benefits in the cafeteria. So stay tuned. I mean, as we all know, Uranus moving into Aries for the next 84 years. Can we keep up with the technological explosions? Just watch for what Mercury's going to bring in the news left and right, including with the Saturn waiting trines to Uranus. All the continuing explosions of the truth versus lies. Here are the 3 waning trines of Saturn to Uranus. As you can see on your screen, the first one was around Christmas Eve, 20 degrees Aries. The next one's going to be the tail end of the Mercury retrograde shadow in May, 26 degrees Aries. We'll have one more in November at 25. Adapting to this changing world, whether it's our beliefs, Saturn in Sag, or technology, Uranus in Aries. Creative innovations, technological breakthroughs, everything that we have been speaking about here. This can not only be huge impetus for the organizing on progressive social issues, but it can also be the good old con artist in any such way that you can see, selling old social structures as change. That could be the bottom line theme of anything that you want to look at. For instance, the Republicans coming out with their version to replace Obamacare and trying to rush it through fast enough, and then the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan entity in the administration, coming through and saying, "Oh, only 24 million people will lose their insurance." And so they were literally trying to take us back to yesterday with healthcare, and it was exposed. It didn't get anywhere. Stay tuned. Mercury waxing Neptune. This is a waxing semi-square, half a square. This is where we're going from new phase to crescent phase. New phase energy moving out, crescent phase energy moving in. So this is where the mercurial reflections on spirituality and religion must be internalized. Crescent phase, integrated. I can hear all I want or ponder all I want about expanding my beliefs, but I must integrate it internally on a conscious level, on a conscious mental level, in order to really move forward with it in my life. So if we make that effort, we can have self-realized actions moving forward with integrity. We can have an ability to hear truth on broader levels. The distortion of that is everything that we said with Chiron again. We can refuse to listen, neglect communications. We can again try to proselytize what we believe is truth versus questioning, is it the truth? Anything with Neptune and its rulership of Pisces is intending to expand us from personal truth to universal timeless truth. And Mercury moving forward with Neptune into that crescent phase can be exposing us again to broader and broader levels of truth. But we must integrate it. We can't just talk it. We must walk it. We must be it. Finally, the nodal axis has aspects to Mercury again. The North Node is making a waning trine to Mercury. Nodes move backwards through the zodiac. They're compared to Mercury. The South Node is making a waxing sextile. South Node, we're going to be moving from victimization to action and recognizing the co-creativity roles as the last trine takes place in Leo Aries. We're going to be throwing off old traumas, South Node and South Node in Aquarius. The North Node, we can see resource rewards here, Virgo to Taurus. We can be realizing service to others and where we can fulfill those roles at the tail end of the North Node in Virgo. And this can lead us into real creative inspirations. We can take our service into creativity with this aspect. How can you see yourself doing this with everything that we've spoken about? Now, oh, my Mercury stationary direct. I thought that was next. Nope, going into the US chart. Here's where the Mercury retrograde is happening. I use the 2:13 a.m. chart for July 4th, the Gemini rising. Of course, what do we have happening in the US chart, no matter which time on July 4th? Uranus in Aries. In 2016, Uranus is hanging out right here. Uranus is making last quarter squares to Mercury last year. This is that polarization into nationalism that we can see happening with Cancer, Capricorn. This year, Uranus is making waxing squares to Pluto. 90 degrees to Uranus from Pluto. The waxing squares have us all, again, as this is 2-year aspects with Uranus in Aries, because we have this Mercury-Pluto opposition. This is this polarization that we have of us versus them, nationalization versus others, being able to be the more progressive or broader inclusive part of US thought, and going, wait a minute, we're just one country among many. This is stirred up by this Mercury retrograde. Mercury is going to make its own waning squares to itself in the US chart, waxing squares to Pluto. Communication power struggles, behind the scene manipulations. Can you just see how everything is stirred up? As Mercury's in the 12th house here in Taurus, we have all kinds of resource things going on behind the scenes. As Mercury retrogrades back into the 11th house here, what's exposed? How are we going to communicate it? The press more or less rules the 9th house. Many in EA have followed ponderings of Jeffrey Green, feeling that the collective soul of the United States, based upon freedom of religion, Pluto and Capricorn through time, consensus getting it down to my religion versus your religion. But 9th house has always traditionally been seen as freedom of the press. And I was mentioning to Leroy today that I really just see a pendulum swing with the press according to fake news and alternative facts and all the distortions going on here. I can just see them, you know, just like social progressives are coming back around, reorganizing to move forward and, you know, support climate change as truth. I can see so many of the media organizations, and as I said earlier, these big tech companies I don't remember how many millions, let's just say 15 million, to create a nonprofit to really report facts and real news, and supporting journalists to study and do that. I see the media and the First Amendment rights just swinging back around and basically going, F you, Trump. That's where this Mercury retrograde cycle is going to shake this up, and you'll find it in all kinds of themes and issues. Here's Donald Trump's chart. I have a tendency to want to believe Bill Meridian, who follows the 9:51 a.m. time period. He is quoting Marla Maples and her daughter Tiffany directly as clients of his. It gives us the 17-degree Leo rising. Mercury's in Donald Trump's 9th house, truth versus lies, teacher versus preacher. And of course, this Mercury retrograde will make squares to his Venus, in orb to his Saturn. How dare you challenge me? How dare you not just take me as your leader of the free world unconditionally? Mercury will make trines to his Mars, 1st and 9th. How many ways shall I dance trying to move my way through? Which, of course, as we know, with this Mercury-Sag opposition in his chart, Mercury rules his sun. If we haven't figured out now that we have a mercurial president who will say whatever needs to be said to just shake it up, move it forward, play both sides off the middle. And yet, I think more and more people are beginning to realize that we have someone who does not know what he is doing. As many of us have said, it's one thing to be the CEO of your own business where you do get to play God. It's another thing to rule a country where it is the needs of the masses and you're the servant. This might be a little bit of a tough lesson for him to learn. I don't think he's going to get it, particularly with this Mercury retrograde. I think the next Mercury retrograde, which is going to take place in Leo right here with the total solar eclipse of the sun, that's probably where it's going to hit home a little more. It's going to be a little bit of denial with this Mercury retrograde. I'm not going to belabor this. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Mercury stationary direct. Again, one more time, the grand trine, the cardinal T-square. Here's Mercury just moving past Uranus, going stationary direct on Uranus. And I don't speak too much about Eris. I'll see what I can to bring it in some more. But as we move through March, April, May, Eris is traveling at 23 degrees Aries. It's going to go direct in July at about 23.5 degrees Aries. It has a cycle that averages about 11,500 years. So all of us have Eris right here, 20 to 23 degrees, okay? And so are we feeling activated by this Mercury retrograde? You bet. There's several symbols out there for Eris. I think this is going to be the one that emerges as the consensus. And Eris, of course, in mythology is the goddess of war. And my opinion of this has been, at this point in space-time, this does not mean as a goddess of war that she is necessarily exclusive. We might be at a turning point where this goddess of war, Eris, coming into human consciousness, being discovered at this point on planet Earth, starts to stand up for Gaia. starts to stand up and opening us up to recognizing Mercury on a conscious level. We're in this together. This sandbox is pretty small in the perspective of things. Now, of course, this can play with all of the Mars distortions and the words that we know as that, and really have the anger, the war, the impatience. You know, it's well known in political circles that a president is always reelected when there's a war going on. Donald Trump, does he have the impatience to wait till his reelection, or is he going to do the nuclear option now? Who knows? Stay tuned. This is why I think it's so important for so many of us to wake up. And while I think that this is a Mercury retrograde that is actually going to be doing this for so many of us. Finally, as I always like to do, the questions to ask yourself, inward, outward, this Mercury retrograde. Who am I really? How do I see myself in the world? What is of most value to me? Are my relationships evolving? What are my resource priorities? How is my understanding of truth expanding? How do I choose to participate on planet Earth? All right. Here's our future Mercury retrograde webinars, as you see on your screen. You will always receive a notice for us if you are subscribed to our email newsletter. This is always a free webinar that we do 3 to 4 times a year. And I've just been kind of, you know, pacing myself with classes right now, everyone. So thank you for understanding. The list is not very big right now. Oh, I forgot the date. Oh, it's a quiz. Oh, was it May 1st, Leroy? I think the nodal axis is going to move into Leo Aquarius on May 9th. I think the class is scheduled.
I think it's May 1st. Yeah, it's a Monday night, right?
It's a Monday night. I think it's I think it is May 1st.
May
but
1st. May Day, yeah.
I was doing it off the top of my head, and I was like, okay, I gotta remember to go look up that detail. Well, as you can see, I missed that mercurial detail, didn't I? All right, so this is it. I'm going to put these last 2 slides in here because I always give you a list of all of these Mercury aspects in the chronological order. And so as I list these on our screens, comments or questions from anybody?
I did confirm.
Anything I missed?
I did confirm May 1st, 6 to 8 p.m. on the Master Bible here in our studio office at EAN headquarters.
Yeah, the good day timer. It has to work for both of us and all our family and everything that goes on in our little social world, Mercury wise. If we get it on that day timer, usually we're pretty safe.
Well, with 100 other people included on this call, I suppose we ought to be clear, right? May 1st it is 6 to 8 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time.
Mm-hmm. The nodal axis moving into Leo Aquarius. And so again, here are all of the Mercury aspects in chronological order that I have mentioned here throughout this webinar. Again, any comments or questions, Leroy?
Well, everybody knows by now, I think, but to the new people, you'll get this PDF And on that PDF of all these slides that Kim has produced and created for the webinar, you'll be able to print this page out, any page out for a resource to put on your bulletin board, etc. We covered a lot of information tonight, and it's a very active Mercury retrograde. So just know that you'll get all that in a PDF. On the first page of that PDF is also the 2 audio links and the permanent video link of this webinar that we just participated in. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much, everyone. All right, so if you're not feeling too confused, hopefully you're feeling excited. Go out there and create as you want, and I hope to see all of you in cyberspace on the March for Science Earth Day this year. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and all the best to you. Good night.